Hi, folks. Appreciate all the comments. Uh, really nice to hear people giving good feedback. There's always one that's negative. No, I'm joking. Um, okay, well, this is episode 2 of I'm not sure if we should call it Grokka or Gregarious, but anyway, Gregarious 2: The Second Coming of Ultramarine Glory. Grokka the Sneaky was, by Orc standards, a genius, which is to say, by any other standards, he was still quite dim. But in Orc culture, thinking outside the box meant realising there was a box, and then smashing it to bits for no good reason. Grokka's latest stroke of genius was he was going to pretend to be an Ultramarine. Again! It had all started after Grokka's mob tangled with those shiny blue Ultramarines during his first sneaky plan. Grokka noticed two things they shouted about. Something called the Emperor, and they had big shiny daka they called bolters. But the most important part, they wore blue, and every self-respecting orc knew that blue was the luckiest colour. So Grokka had set out to make himself into one of those Ultramarines. Sure, he didn't have the proper ceramite armour or a bolter, but that wasn't the problem. Grokka had something much more powerful than those things. Orky belief. He cobbled together a suit of Ultramarine armour out of scrap, duct tape, and a lot of blue paint. His armour wobbled, it rattled, it clanged, and it sounded like a junkyard on legs. But to Grokka, and thanks to Orky reality-bending belief, it looked just like the real thing. He marched into the Ultramarine camp, fully convinced of his disguise, shouting, "For the Emperor!" And strangely enough, it had worked. His orcish belief was so strong that the Ultramarines, utterly bewildered, somehow accepted him as one of their own. Grokka, now calling himself Gregarious, fought alongside them, even gaining a few respectable nods for his brutally effective tactics of just chopping up everything in sight. But then that Chaplain arrived. Chaplain Veritas had seen through the disguise, as any reasonable human would after, say, a few minutes of watching an enormous green-skinned space marine hack apart enemies with a chopper instead of a bolter. Veritas had demanded Gregarious remove his helmet. Grokka, ever the thinker, had decided that only a heretic would question his loyalty, and so he decided that Veritas was a heretic on the spot, and he knocked him flat with a well-placed punch, and then he scarpered. His blue-painted scrap armour clanging behind him, as bolter rounds zipped by. That had been the first time, but now Gregarious was back for round 2, convinced that the Ultramarines had been duped by Veritas, the heretic. This time he was here to save them. "Right, lads," thumping his mismatched chest plate, "we's gonna crump them Ultramarines and save them from their heretic leader. They need us." With that, he marched into battle once more, his armour freshly painted with an even thicker coat of blue, because, as every orc knew, blue is lucky. His mob, ever loyal to their war boss's peculiar plans, followed behind him, shouting, "For the Emperor!" and swinging their choppers with wild enthusiasm. On the other side of the battlefield, the Ultramarines stood ready for combat. And then through the dust and the smoke, they saw him.
"Brother, it's him again,"
muttered one Marine over the comm channel, and lowering his bolter in disbelief. The massive green figure of Gregarious, once again decked out in his ridiculous approximation of Ultramarine armour, was charging directly towards them, leading a horde of orcs. Chaplain Veritas, his skull-faced helmet glinting in the dim light, clenched his croziers tightly.
"The Xenos returns,"
he growled.
"and this time he's brought an army."
Gregarious, on the other hand, was certain of his mission. This time he would succeed where he'd failed before. "I's gonna save ya from the heretics," he bellowed as he charged, chopping wildly at anything in his path. His armour clanged and rattled, but Orc belief worked its strange magic once again. The Ultramarines, still shaken from their previous encounter, hesitated.
"Could it be he thinks we're the heretics?"
one Marine asked, staring in confusion as Gregarious stormed closer.
"It does not matter,"
Veritas growled.
"The Emperor's light will purge this madness."
In Gregarious' mind, however, this was the final showdown. He spotted Veritas across the battlefield, his skull-faced helmet making him out as the biggest heretic of them all. "There you are, you sneaky git," Gregarious roared, charging straight at Veritas. "You can't hide from the righteous wrath of Ultramarine Gregarious." Veritas, ever the stoic, met the charge head-on.
"Xenos filth, you dare impersonate the Emperor's chosen?"
Grokka swung his chopper with all his might, and for a brief moment the two clashed. Bolterfire, mad orcs, and the thundering power of belief smashing against the unyielding will of the Emperor's servants. Once again, chaos erupted on the battlefield, with Gregarious' mob shouting, "For the Emperor!" while slashing through the Ultramarine lines. And yet through it all, Gregarious truly believed he was saving his misunderstood battle brothers from the heresy. By the end of the battle, as bolter rounds zipped past and explosions rocked the field, Gregarious found himself retreating once again. his armour dented, but his spirit unbroken. They still don't know I'm on their side, he muttered, thumping his chest as his boys cheered. But I'll come back next time, they'll see the truth. And so, Gregarious, ever convinced of his righteous ultramarine destiny, would return, always blue, always lucky, and always determined to rid the universe of the heresy that only he could see. Well, I hope you enjoyed that one. It's quite amusing. I'm pretty sure there'll be another episode. I've got some interesting ideas up my sleeve for how this continues. But anyway, take care. If you're not a right git, use the big think and share and subscribe.